Okay, now we will be moving on to the final speaker of the day, Dr. Redouane Elkamhi. He's an associate professor of finance at the Rotman School of Management at U of T for master's and PhD level courses. His research is focused on theoretical and empirical asset pricing, and his recent work has been published in leading financial journals. Before moving to the finance field, Redouane Elkamhi also worked as an electrical engineer for a few years. So I guess if you're ready, I'll let you speak now.
Thank you for inviting me. This is, I'm sorry for my voice is a bit, I went for a run this morning and I think I'm not, I drank some cold water and I lost my voice a bit, but that's shows that I couldn't model the future of my own presentation today. Drinking cold water wasn't really that helpful. I'm not gonna have slides and definitely not going to have charts. And that shows you from the previous presentation that Catherine emphasized the fact that a good model should have beautiful charts, professionalism, and I wanted to show you a different type of modelers, which is usually could be more on the theory side. I work to give you like a snapshot of what I usually do. I started in mathematics. I was in the International Olympiad of Mathematics. Maybe you guys also participate in the Olympiad. What do I do with my mathematical skill? And I started engineering for 5 years. And after that said, no, this is not for me. And I moved to doing a PhD in finance, which was fantastic. And I never regret it after that. I work in finance industry. I am a tenure professor. And I did around 15 years of consulting right now. I work mainly with pension funds, Canadian pension fund, and I have done some for a long time with the firms like PIMCO in the US and other places in New York. Means I do modeling a lot in industry, but I will focus in today's discussion about I just want to give you a flavor, a little bit of what, and I was thinking about the topic when Catherine also was talking about, and I wanted to make sure to give you some different perspective than value in the firm. Catherine have done a great job to talk about the modeling in terms of you work in an M&A, which is a merger acquisition type of business. And the modeling she talked about is more geared toward having a good background in accounting, having a good background in Excel as a tool, and having an understanding of finance as a part of presenting scenarios that she was talking about, which is the good, the worse, and whatever. I'm trying to first start to tell you something I learned through the years, and hopefully really it will teach you something today. You will be informed by it. Modeling the future from the title doesn't really mean predicting the future. I just want to make clear this is very to everybody in the room or in the virtual room right now. Because many people actually, when we work in industry and we build a model, they say, oh, how do you know how it's going to happen in the future? Or how do you know this? And how do you know that? And it's very important to understand that having a model is only, and I think Ryan mentioned it in his presentation in the beginning to talk. He said it's a simple representation of what you're trying to do. And I'm going to emphasize the word simple representation. A model, the word is so complex. And you can't take everything that moves. And you're going to run into this. You guys are going to work, when you're going to start working, developing a model, and everybody's going to come to the room and say, well, what about this? And what about that? And did you consider this? And did you consider that? And I'm going to bet you're not going to be able to consider everything in a model, because in that case, the model will actually not be good. A model should be a simple representation of the word. And you can achieve to understand how the variables interact together, and to draw inference, to draw some understanding about what you're trying to solve. Means number one, I said, is not about predicting the future. It's about trying to have an assessment of what may happen, but we don't predict anything. It's actually very bad to predict. And I will go to case studies and example to tell you that if you start modeling by predicting, you're writing the worst model of the future, because the future is way more complex than your mathematical model that depends on few variables. One. The second thing you're going to run into many times when you're going to start working, and this has happened to me when I work many times I have done a lot of work in pension fund and portfolio allocation, and we try to build portfolios in order, and I will talk a little bit more in details about what that really means. But I just want to kind of tell you something you will hear a lot. Well, I see traders make money. There's many traders that make money that don't know equations. Why do I need all this sophisticated mathematics to understand how the stock price will behave? How do I need this, I don't know, how interest rate will behave, how other variable will behave? If the trader themselves, when they trade in the stock, they're not using all this mathematics, and that's actually true. My simple answer to this, and this is something that resonates with me 15 years ago, and I want to leave you with this because I come from engineering. That's something really clear to us. And you ask yourself, I'm going to give you an analogy of the bird. When a bird flies, a bird doesn't know gravity. A bird doesn't study, oh, there is a gravity and there is the air and there is the speed of air and I need to do like this in order for me to fly. Bird doesn't really know all that stuff in details. The bird just fly by intuition. But in order for me to build a flying engine, I need to understand the simple representation of what the word is, the simple representation of the physics and the models in physics in order to build a small plane. It means it's not necessarily disconnected if the players in the market don't really do math, that you shouldn't be doing math in order to value the instruments. It means these are kind of the core things you're going to run into when you're going to kind of work in this area. Just try to remember this. If you're going to remember this from this talk, just remember that it's not necessary for people to be using models so that you have to be using them in order to model the future or in order to model these instruments. And everything about the future, you should only thrive to have a simple representation of the future. Because the more complicated your model, the more not interesting really, because you can't even explain it. These are kind of the two, I call it the mantra, man 1 and 2. And I want to discuss a little bit an example, but before that, again, I have something else to share about this general ideas, because when I read modeling the future, these are the things that comes to my mind that I want you really to understand the difference. What is a life cycle of a model? For example, Catherine, I piggyback on what she was talking about. She just mentioned, okay, one model that is related to value in a firm. And it has multiple assumptions that you've seen in Excel. And she has multiple scenarios and she has multiple years and those depend on some assumptions. A life cycle of a model always go like this. And the most important part of the model actually is to understand what the user really wants or what you really want to model. I personally think 99% of bad models is just because you fall in love with some mathematical technique or some mathematical tool. And let's call it, could be even machine learning, could be predictive analytics, could be stochastic calculus, could be abstract algebra. And you fall in love with the technique and you understand really what you're trying to model. And you don't understand what you're trying to model. I mean, sincerely, from my own experience, which is humble and minor, not like a lot. And in my opinion, I have learned this the hard way. It is extremely important to spend time to understand what are you really modeling? What are we really trying to achieve? And while it seems stupid, and you say, well, how can I model something without knowing? If you trust me, believe me, 90% of the time, people just falling in love with the great copy paste. I have a model that does here, let me put it here, let me just change something and make something work. And normally you should spend a lot of time, whatever what you're doing for modeling, could be in a bank, an insurance company, in a pension fund, in a wealth management, in a pricing department, or any financial product that you're going to work for. It could be a mutual fund, could be, I don't know, a hedge fund. It's extremely important to understand what are you modeling, what are the constraints around what you model. A model for a pension fund may not be useful to, let's say I want to build a model that have a portfolio allocation. I want to build the best portfolio to be rich. That's different of building a portfolio for a pension fund to be able to pay the retirement for these people. That's a very different portfolio from a wealth management. And it's a very different portfolio from, let's say, I don't know, a family office. In a sense, they already have money generated from industry and they want to make money in the financial market because they have a lot of cash. Understanding the constraints you work on is as important as understanding the client. One example for this constraint could be, and now let us start with an example. And I want to talk about one example that is interesting, not to you guys because all of you guys are young, but hopefully you can understand the importance of retirement because all of you have parents and whatever, or somebody in the family or uncles or whatever that are closer to retirement, and they talk about it. And they talk about, oh, what is happening in the day? When can I be able to retire and get money from my pension? And I want to make you to understand a little bit when we do this. And I have done a lot of work at Ontario Teacher Fund. I've done a lot of work at HOOP, which is Healthcare at Ontario Fund, a lot of work at Ct.5, which is, and some work at Caisse de Dépôt in Montreal. And the question is always like this, and I'm going to limit myself to one example for you guys to have a little bit of a clear idea of so many assumptions that comes in. And if I want to model the best portfolio, and let's take these days as an example, let's put ourselves in March, for example. March, when COVID just started and the market started trembling, going down, and then you're asking yourself, oh, I have retirement. HOOP, for example, Healthcare Ontario have 380,000 people that are going to retire in the future and they need to pay them. CPPIB, we're talking about millions of people. They manage around $400 billion. And you're seeing your portfolio go into hell, like losing money. And the question that you're asking the modelers in the room, and basically that the board ask, especially the total fund management, is, oh, what should we do? What should we buy? What should we sell and why and how much? The question is very different than if you basically just doing your own portfolio, because now you're doing it for people that may need money 20 years later. And the question becomes, should they sell right now? What should they sell? Should they sell and wait and then put my money in cash? Should they sell and buy gold? Gold may be a good investment, maybe, but I disagree with that. I'm just giving you an example. Or should they buy fixed income? I should just buy a bond, and I think hopefully in the room people know what a bond is. The bond is some security, let's say, that is not risky, that gives you a certain cash flows every single 6 months or 3 months, instead of equity that is going up and down. But then you're asking yourself what the bond give me, and the bond was giving you something like 0.5%, which is almost nothing. And then you're gonna say, oh, I can go safe investment. And if I go safe investment, I'm gonna get nothing to pay my retirement income in the future. But if I go risky, I may lose it all. And if I lose it all, we have no money to pay the retiree. It means the question is really now about what should I do to build the best portfolio for retirement? I can't just put my money in a safe asset, because if I put it in safe asset, I'm not gonna have enough to pay them, because I need to pay them some kind of money, they contract. They wanna make, let's say, the salary when they grow up after 65. And that's a dilemma, guys in the room, guys and ladies in the room. You have to be able to have some modeling skills. And the first thing you start with in modeling skills, as I said, is the constraint. My constraint is retirement right now. My constraint is a long-term investment that is around 20 years in ahead. And I want to make sure that 20 years ahead, I have enough money. And maybe the good idea is it's okay to lose money in the short term. But you, if you're investing for yourself, you say, well, it's not good to lose money in the first term. Who cares? I want to actually just withdraw, put it in cash and do it later. But they can't afford to do that because they have to pay some pensioners very soon. You know what I'm trying to talk about, hopefully, is that you can see the importance of understanding the problem that you're dealing with. Different answers. I know in your class in high school, every question have one answer sometimes, but sometimes you have multiple answers for the same question. A portfolio that is a good modeler for the future depends on what really the constraint of that future is. A retirement investment is different than wealth management. I spent now 15 years in retirement portfolio construction, and I can tell you it doesn't cease personally to impress me how things are so wild. And I want to give you the example that you guys can see in the news. The economy, nobody goes to work for many years, for many months. People are unemployed. A lot of coffee shops are closed, restaurants are closed, the economy is shut down, and the stock market is doing great. Well, if you decided in March to say, oh, you know what, I'm going to put all my money in cash because it's not going to get me anything, because it's so risky, and I don't want to lose money. Well, what happened? You just lost so much money in the rebound because the market have crashed by 30%. And then if we already have realized the loss of 30, but because people have stayed for different reasons, and we can talk why and why not, you already know much better than when you started in March, because the market have actually captured all the gains. Now the question, it's easy to me to look back and understand it, but it's very difficult for me to predict it. This is why you need models to discipline you. That's another key that I want you to remember from this presentation. We talk about modeling is not about predicting, and also we talk about models that manage to discipline the behavior of portfolio construction. If you leave it to individuals, they may make behavioral decisions. While behavioral decision can be great, I'm not saying no, but sometimes model can save you from your own problem because they have a process, because you may build a process in place. And just take this COVID example. Just look at, if you're anybody in this, I don't know how many people are listening to this. Maybe I see only 5 faces. Maybe there are more people. Go home and check the stock market in March, see how much it dropped, see how much it come back, and see the economy. The economy is going down, the stock market is going up, and if you have left the stock market in the middle of the crash, you have lost a lot of money. A model will tell you to stay. A behavior will tell you to leave. At least my behavior will tell me to leave because I'm risk averse. But thanks to the modeling sometimes, even if they make simple representation of the word, they may help you actually make good decisions. It means the constraint is as important as understanding what you're really modeling. Now, you're not the only one, as you guys are gonna work, you're not gonna be the only one in the room that do modeling. And that's a problem I see all the time. Different modelers, also, I like to piggyback on what people present. Catherine also, I don't know her, but I'm piggyback on something she said. She said the beauty had to be beautiful. It's true, actually. If you really believe in something, you have to see beauty in what you're modeling. And if you see something beautiful and somebody comes and says, oh, it's so ugly. Like somebody, if you come and say to my son, it's ugly, I don't like it. Like my son, look, the most handsome guy in the world for me, in my own eye, but it's almost like my model. My model is pretty cool. You have to be able to kind of detach from that. That's gonna take you some time. That's difficult. Honestly, guys, this is difficult. Because if you really put your passion in the modeling, it's very difficult to accept criticism. It's very difficult. But if you manage to do it, that's a great asset to do. You have to have passion in what you do because you're trying to model, you're trying to come up with technique, you're trying to believe in what you're doing. And no, this is a simple representation of the word. I may be missing something. Listening to feedback because you have just few assumptions and the model is as good as its assumption. You change the assumption, the model change. And you have to be able to listen to people pushing back on the assumptions. I don't mean, by the way, this is a wrong thing sometimes. You don't have to listen to everybody saying this is wrong and agree with them. No, you have to push back. But I'm just saying what is really difficult. What is difficult is to understand that you're only having a simple representation and other people may have a positive feedback, and you have to be able to listen to it in the room and be able to kind of convince people with your argument. Because I think what is important in a room, and given my age, long time I didn't do the analyst job, but I do it at the board level, and I present for boards, and I can tell you it's the same challenge. You go to the board, and everybody, man, they are not even in the same area. And it's extremely difficult to basically tell people that you did, oh, I did this Monte Carlo. I heard somebody in the beginning mentioning the word Monte Carlo, and I assume you guys now know what is it. You did Monte Carlo, I have some stochastic calculus, and I use Excel and machine learning. It's not gonna go. People are not gonna put their money on some buzzwords. Those are just buzzwords. And they will not sign in on managing $400 billion for CPPAB or 380 right now, because they lost some money, on just saying this buzz nice word. I have this, I have that, and I have that. And they're going, oh, yeah, you look great. You're amazing. I'm going to just put all my money there so that you can have the retirement income. Explaining it is as important as building it. And that also ties up to how I start this. Understanding why you're doing it help you to explain the outcome and the output of these models. And it's not easy. Honestly, guys, it is passion. You have to have passion in what you do. I'll tell you me what is not easy. If you don't have a passion for something, you can always explain it easier, by the way. It's the opposite. When you have so much passion about what you do, you get tied to what you do. You kind of love it so much that nobody should touch it. Like, oh, no, 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 no. And you become too defensive. And with experience, this is actually what you guys will have. You will have passion in what building something cool, but all you have to be mindful that is actually not word or whatever. It is wrong by design. Everything is wrong by design, but we're just striving to have the best outcome out of these models using a simple representation of the world. Really, this is what we strive to do, and this is what we try to do when we explain it to people like that. Explaining it is as important as understanding it, and it comes in between. If you see me, I didn't spend math because I assume that's a necessary, but I'm just talking about a non-sufficient. It's necessary, but not sufficient. Definitely it's necessary in this era to be good in math and good in coding. It's my weakness, but I can get away with it because there's a lot of people that do it. And basically I just have to assign what I do, but it's a little bit my weakness, for example. But I used to do it as an engineer, but now I don't have time to do it. Requires a lot of coding, and coding is not, it's becoming almost like writing. You just have to know it, and you have to develop the tools. Like, I don't know which analogy I can give you for the tool, but it's almost, think about it as, I view it as, you're almost like hiring, if I hire a modeler, I only know one trick pony. The modeler just, like, for example, do Excel and that's it. And he just can code in Excel. It's actually a problem because you have so many applications that exist already done, let's say in Python or in Julia or in whatever these new software. There's a lot of libraries, a lot of things exist. You just have to be able to go and understand what is happening, pick up what you need from there, and build what you need out of it. You don't need to reinvent the wheel each time you develop a model. But again, picking up the right thing comes from understanding what you model, understanding the constraints. Please, guys, remember this. Understand the constraint of what you're modeling. It is always a mistake. People just jump in and they want to write an equation, want to build something without knowing for what. What regulations, for example, if you work in a banks are regulated, models are regulated. They need some things that they need to satisfy. If you work in pension fund, there are actuaries and they have liability regulations. You need to model the longevity of people, how people are going to live, for how long, immigration, stuff like that. And these have also models for it. And a portfolio design can be different for different areas. Now, this is the area I work on recently, but traditionally, there's a lot of modeling actually in the bank in pricing. This is the most modeling heavy area, but the least rewarding in terms of money. Just to tell you one of the problem of it, because it has been replaced by a lot of softwares and there is less, let's say, skills in it now compared to the portfolio allocation. I recommend many of you think about the portfolio allocation future, because we're gonna always need people in the area, and they are different from pension fund to insurance companies to bank to wealth management. And I will recommend that you guys spend a lot of time, not only on the tools, but only on the way you communicate. And communicate is not English, by the way. I want to make a distinction because I'm an immigrant too. I came here in 2001 and I left to the US to work for 10 years and I came back, but I came to Canada in 2001. And I just learned English here. First time I started learning English is in 2001. But I see many people, they can speak English, they're born here. It's not necessary, it's not English. Clarity of mind, translate the language. You may not speak perfect English. You guys might not have this problem, but I'm just saying. When I say communication, a lot of people say, oh, I need a class about communication to know how to. No, I don't think so, to be honest. I think about clarity of what you're doing. It's perfectly clear why you're doing it, for what reason you're doing it, what is the effect of that variable for your output, why your output is important, what is the feedback loop from the output to the assumptions, and what is the impact on the assumptions if I take one by one. That has to be clarity. And then you can speak about it clearly to people. And I'm not talking you use a nice word. Okay, it helps sometimes to impress people with some nice English, but I will emphasize order one, clarity of the message, and then the use of language. And it's not often understood. People understand communication just by, oh, I need to speak better English, or I need to speak better, I don't know, Chinese, or I don't speak Chinese very well. And I have presented to a sovereign fund in China when I did some work in China, and I kind of just tried with my son. They still call me. They didn't fire me. It means it's not really necessary to be like an amazing speaker. You just have to be clear about what you're modeling, and you have to be clear to convince people that the assumption you have chosen, it actually span good variation of the future. You're not predicting the future, because if you start predicting, you lose, because everybody in the room will have a different prediction than you, and that your model just flop. That's why make sure when you have this session called Modeling the Future, that everybody understand what we do in this session. We're actually trying to build simple representation of the world. We learn from history. We don't mimic history. No model is mimicking history in a Monte Carlo setting. You're actually learning from history, but you're not mimicking history for the future. You're setting some assumptions about the future, and you know the limitation of those assumptions for the output you're doing. I think I will leave it to this. I prefer to take more questions than speaking too much. And I probably already speak too much, but I wish it was understood without slides. I just want to give you a different version, that the Catherine organized version of modeling, and the Redouane unorganized presentation with no slides, so that you see a variation.